Hello, welcome back to Football League World TV. It's time for the latest edition of Under the Microscope, and here we're looking ahead to the League Two playoff final between Mansfield Town and Port Vale. I'm your host, George Dagless, and joining me is Marcus Ali. Marcus, how are you?
Yeah, really well. Thanks, George. League Two's been a thrilling watch this season. So yeah, excited to observe what the crescendo's how it's gonna turn out on Saturday. You know, it's good to see two teams that have been right up there, particularly in the second half of the season, meeting in the final. So yeah, looking forward to getting into the show.
Yeah, two really good sides. This should be a cracking game on Saturday. Mansfield and Port Vale fans, get in touch with us. We're across Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter for the next 20 or so minutes. Let us know your thoughts ahead of the game. Where do you see it going? How excited or nervous are you ahead of kickoff at Wembley this weekend? Let's get going. Marcus, let's look at the two teams' season in general. First of all, let's start with Mansfield. A season of two halves, I think it's probably fair to say. Started the campaign really poorly, didn't they? And there were questions over Nigel Clough's future, but turned it around. Obviously, went on a great unbeaten run and got themselves into the playoffs, finishing seventh in the end in the league. What did you make of the Stags campaign?
Well, it was an outstanding turnaround. I, for one, was probably leaning towards Nigel Clough sort of being removed from his position as manager at one stage. But yeah, the turnaround was incredible. Just started scoring goals at a rapid rate, and yeah, sort of tightening up at the back where they weren't able to at the start of the campaign. There were quite a lot of new signings in the summer, and in the January transfer window. So it was maybe natural to see a little bit of a transition period. But there was one week where the Stags were in the relegation zone, which yeah, none of us really expected at the start of the season. Clough managed to sort of settle on a system, and that really helped them sort of go from strength to strength in that amazing run. Did tail off a little bit towards the end of the season. Some supporters will maybe be disappointed that they weren't able to kick on for automatic promotion, but given the start to be in the playoff final, it's a tremendous achievement. And yeah, we're able to conduct a very impressive January transfer window to give them a little bit more, I think, going into the playoffs than some of the other teams around them. So yeah, really impressive. We were definitely foolish to doubt Nigel Clough. And yeah, they have been knocking on the door for a few seasons, been some underwhelming campaigns as well. But Mansfield have been a very well-run club at a League Two level for the last, well, almost like a 5-year period probably. So yeah, it's all culminating lead into reaching obviously the final hurdle on Saturday. So no, it's been Nigel Clough was a coup to get him in the first place. Of course, there were some ups and downs, but yeah, in the end, they're looking very strong, particularly with the manner that they got past Northampton, of course, in the semi-final.
As for Port Vale, Marcus, I think it's fair to say they're a team that you've always quite liked this season. They're a team that you were expecting to be in the promotion picture. And now here we are, playoff final, and they're there. What have you made of their season though as a whole? For quite a lot of the time, they were just outside the playoffs, weren't they? And they had those games in hand. They were looking to try and get into the top three as well.
Yeah, I think the fixture schedule went against them quite a bit. You could argue that with Mansfield as well. It gave them quite a tough ask leading into the final few months of the season. And of course, that yeah eventually saw some ups and downs in terms of results. Vale have been very strong defensively this season. One of the best defensive sides in the division. That's been sort of the main basis that's been able to prop them up over a consistent basis. I think that they probably would have earmarked automatic promotion as an aim at stages in this season, but they're able to dust themselves down and get past an impressive Swindon side in the playoffs as well. So, no, it's been an impressive season from Vale. Since they changed owners a few years ago, it has been clear that they've been on an upward trajectory. Recruitment has kind of reflected that as well. And yeah, it was a bold decision to take Darryl Clark off Walsall last season, obviously having to pay a compensation payment as well involved in that. Probably don't see that too much at League Two level. So yeah, they've shown a lot of ambition, and I think similar to Mansfield, when you look at the journey that they've been on, it has been you know some promising moves off the pitch that have led towards this. So yeah, both sides could possibly be a little bit disappointed that they weren't able to kick on for automatic promotion. Bristol Rovers kind of snuck up and overtook these two clubs in the final few months of the season, but no, it's been really impressive from Vale. They have sustained it over a long period of time, and I think the fixture schedule, that even though when they were outside the playoffs, they were one of those teams with games in hand that you knew if they got on a run, they could get back into automatic promotion contention, which they did. Didn't quite have enough to get over the line. But no, it's definitely been a season of progress after what was something of a transition year with Darrell Clarke coming in last season.
Let's look at the semi-finals now that Mansfield and Portfield had to get through to get to this final. Mansfield, of course, overcame Northampton Town 3-1 on aggregate markers, a 2-1 victory in the first leg and a 1-0 win at Sixfields in the second leg. Were you perhaps a little bit surprised, though, that the Stags obviously finishing seventh? They were perhaps the team, if you like, that had the most to do, although obviously the points tally was very close in those playoff places. And I guess Northampton as well had the stuffing kicked out of them, didn't they, in losing out on the top three on the final day as Bristol Rovers pulled off a miracle.
Yeah, no, I didn't read too much into the placings, to be honest. You have to look at the points tallies, and that they were so narrow. Mansfield were in a top three hunt until literally the final couple of weeks of the season. So even though it was 4 places in the table, the gap was a lot tighter than that in reality between them and Northampton. If they hadn't had such a poor start to the season, the Stags, then they probably would have ended up finishing in the top 3. So, no, very impressive to win both matches by a 1-goal scoreline. Obviously, there would have been some nerves creeping in because the Stags possibly could have had the tie done by the time they had to go to Sixfields Stadium. Raced into a 2-goal lead, in the first leg, just over half an hour into the game, and Rhys Oates was causing loads of problems for the Cobblers. They showed their mettle, John Brady's men. They got themselves back into it and were probably in the ascendancy to level the tie to take it back to Sixfields. But Mansfield were able to stand firm, and I was really impressed by the way that Nigel Clough kind of adapted his tactics as the tie progressed. There were 3 changes for the second leg, and after Stephen McLaughlin's opener, it was a case of sitting on a 2-goal lead, essentially, which the way that they're set up really helped them to stop the Cobblers really creating any chances of note. They only managed 1 shot on target in their whole home second leg, which is what of course they were leaning on after losing 2-1 at Field Mill. So very impressive tie from Nigel Clough and Mansfield. And I think it showed the strength of their squad as well, that he was able to make those changes and the team didn't really lose any quality. And some of the options that he has off the bench, of course, are very menacing for fourth tier level as well.
As for Port Vale, obviously overcame Swindon, didn't they, in the semi-finals? Needed a penalty shootout to do that. If you look at the form table as well going into the game, Port Vale kind of sort of limped into the playoffs, didn't they? As Swindon arrived like a train, but ultimately Vale got themselves over the line. Do you think that may play on their minds a little bit, the form that they showed going into the playoffs, or do you think now that's all done and they can focus fully on trying to get this victory against Mansfield on Saturday?
It's an interesting one. I think the form that they went into the playoffs with, if you look a little bit further back in terms of the last few months of the season, they still were quite strong. It was just the form of the clubs beneath them, the likes of Salford and Sutton, throwing their names into the conversation that caused a little bit of anxiety at Vale. I am concerned there could be something of an emotional hangover due to winning 6-5 in a penalty shootout to get to Wembley is probably a little bit more draining than Mansfield's professional 2-goal aggregate win over Northampton. So it's going to be an interesting one to see how Vale kind of bear up going into this one. Jamie Proctor, I think, is a massive sort of dilemma for Darrell Clarke to consider. Made such a huge impact on getting them back in the tie as a whole, really, after being 2-0 down at Swindon in the first leg, going on to halve the deficit through James Wilson. He wasn't fit to play any part, even get on the bench in the second leg against Swindon. So I think if he can play some part, it'll be interesting to see how far Darrell Clarke pushes him. But no, I don't think they'll be too worried about the way that they ended the season, considering the incredible high that it was overcoming Swindon. They really did look down and out before Harry McCurdy's penalty went over the bar. So a second chance almost. But it was a much improved performance at Vale Park. Even though they only won the game 1-0, they were much the better side, particularly in that first half. James Wilson missing a tap-in before converting one, and linking up with Kean Harrott quite well at the top of the pitch. So I don't think they'll have too many concerns over the way they slipped away from the automatic promotion places, because it was so tight anyway. It's exaggerated by finishing fifth. That doesn't tell the whole story of how close that it really was. So no, I'm sure Vale will be very confident. They've been very consistent over the course of the season. They've got a set way of playing under Darryl Clark, and I think they'll be completely believing in that going into the match.
Okay, let's talk strengths and weaknesses, Marcus. Now let's look at Mansfield's team. You look at it immediately. You mentioned the attacking talent that they've got. I suppose, do you expect Nigel Clough to send his team out and try and take the game to Port Vale?
It's a very interesting one, because it was some defensive changes for me, I think. In terms of the second leg at Northampton, John Joe O'Toole played in the back four in the first leg and then in central midfield in the second. So I can kind of see a half and half. I think there will be changes again, but he'll probably go a little bit more attacking than they did at Sixfields. I think they've probably got the upper hand in terms of the midfield contingent for the Stags. Some really impressive technicians for the level compared to that of Port Vale. I think one dilemma that Clough will have to contend with is how to deal with Ben Garrity, probably one of the best attacking midfielders at League Two levels, got 12 goals this season. So yeah, I'm kind of waiting for team news to sort of judge Clough's approach, because of the way that he switched it up for the match against Cobblers, and whether he'll take a more pragmatic approach with it being a final and being aware of the threats that Vale pose. It's going to be really interesting to see, and I'm finding it quite hard to second guess him, to be honest. I do think Mansfield will probably be slightly more offensive than Vale, because, as I mentioned, their strengths do lie in terms of their defensive solidity a little bit more, I'd argue. And I think Jordan Bowery and Rhys Oates have really put together an impressive attacking partnership for the level in the last few months. So they've got nothing to fear in that regard, but then up against a pretty intimidating Vale back three that know their roles very well. So it's going to be interesting. Obviously, Lucas Akins came into the side at Sixfields Stadium to play alongside Bowery and Oates, and I think that would be really exciting to see, to be honest. Two big physical presences in Bowery and Akins, really looking to match that Vale back three that have been so dominant aerially over the course of the season as well. So yeah, it's going to be interesting. I'm kind of waiting for team news to judge Clough's approach, but I would maybe expect him to set up a little bit more attacking than Clark's Vale.
Okay. As for Vale, where are their strengths lie, Marcus? I mean, Ben Garrity's a player, obviously, that you mentioned. He's had a phenomenal season, but Vale have got a number of players that are going to probably cause Mansfield issues over the course of the game on Saturday.
Yeah, Kean Harrett's an interesting one, because I do think he will start if Proctor isn't able to, which looks like likely the case. Obviously, there's quite a big break in between the semi-finals and the final, which gives Proctor a chance. But Harrett was an impressive live wire in the semi-final, got the assist for James Wilson in the second leg, and actually scored a late brace in the most recent head-to-head between the two sides. Vale beating Mansfield 3-1. So it'd be interesting to see what kind of role he plays. Obviously, James Wilson is their inform attacker. He's scored three goals in his last three games, including a vital one in a 1-0 win at Exeter City to ensure Vale did finish in the playoffs. Looking down the team sheet, obviously I've mentioned the back line. I think David Worrell is still an outstanding player at League Two level, really. Hasn't quite hit the heights this season in terms of goals and assists, but in terms of dead balls and crossing from wide areas, even from deep, which he needs to be using more, because he's playing in a right wing back role where he has played further forward in his career. I think he's a player that could have a huge influence on the match. He achieved 11 assists in 2019-20 and 2020-21 for Vale in League Two. Hasn't hit those heights this season. It hasn't been. He hasn't had the cutting edge, or maybe it's just that the striker's not being as clinical for him. But I think he's a player that could have an experienced player that could really take the game to Mansfield, and particularly with his crossing, maybe with Proctor coming on late on, that could be an avenue for Vale to hurt Mansfield. So obviously Garrity, with the numbers that he's hit this season, is a player that Mansfield will be aware of, and Wilson comes in very good form. But I think Worrell at right wing back sort of lining up against Stephen McLaughlin, who's had such a good season for Mansfield. I think that would be a very intriguing area of the pitch, and one that if Worrell can get the better of him could have a huge say on the way this match turns out.
Okay. Let's look at some of their previous meetings. Let's look at the last six. It's pretty evenly. Well, it's as even as you can get. In fact, Mansfield 1-2, Port Vale 1-2. There's been 2 draws. Although, admittedly, one game was in the Papa John's Trophy, and Port Vale won that on penalties. Let's look at the games though, specifically this season. They're probably the best ones to talk about. Mark, it's the best reference point. Mansfield and Port Vale drew 1-1. Field Mill back in October. Then Vale beat Mansfield 3-1 at Vale Park earlier on this year in March. I think either of those games will have massive bearing on this one. I mean, I suppose you look at the game that was only a couple of months ago that Vale won, but then Mansfield arguably are coming into this one in better form, so perhaps it doesn't matter that much anyway.
Yeah, tricky to know how much to read into these types of things. I think the 3-1 win for Port Vale, the most recent head-to-head in the league, on the balance of play was much more even game than the scoreline suggests. Yeah, there was an element of fortune to some of Harrott's goals, and yeah, I think on another day Mansfield could come away, maybe take a point there. The 1-1 draw at Field Mill earlier in the season as well. Ollie Hawkins misses a penalty, and it was something of a smash and grab point for Vale in the end. I think the Stags definitely did edge that one. Obviously, yeah, so many different players on different form, playing different shapes heading into this one. So it's I'm not one for reading too much into recent head-to-heads, to be honest. Playing at a neutral venue as well will change that as well. So yeah, I think although Vale have taken 4 points off Mansfield this season, I don't think that's as big of an advantage as the scoreline suggests heading into the match at Wembley. I think Mansfield were really in both games, and yeah, possibly should have won at Field Mill, and yeah, 3-1 probably reflects a little bit harshly on them going into this one. So I almost think it probably just provides more motivation, more for Nigel Clough to dissect ahead of the fixture. I'm expecting it to be a very evenly matched game, but yeah, Port Vale have the advantage on the head-to-heads, but yeah, I'm not reading too much into that going into the game.
Yeah, no. Before we get to score prediction, Marcus, as well, I think we'll just look at, I guess, the storylines of these two clubs that we've seen in recent years. I think for Mansfield, as you sort of mentioned at the start of the show, it's what they've been aiming for a while, isn't it? We've seen them make the playoffs before in League Two, but obviously come up short. It's an opportunity for them to get into League One, which is something they've wanted to do for quite a while, probably ever since they've sort of got themselves back into the Football League. And as for Port Vale, again, as you mentioned at the top of the show, it's almost a culmination of what their new owners have been wanting to do since they took charge. You know, Vale were in a bad way, really, weren't they, when they come in? But they've started to turn the club around, and this would be the icing on the cake. Which story particularly are you more excited to potentially see come off this weekend? One of them's going to have a happier ending, obviously, than the other.
Oh, that's a tough one. I'd probably say Port Vale, given everything that's gone against them this season. The story with Darryl Clark having his close family bereavement and then coming back into the management team. I think it was the final game of the season. Exeter was the first one where he was back as the main man in the dugout. And yeah, how bleak it was looking for Vale. I think it was towards the end of the 2018-19 season where they were scrapping towards the bottom of League Two. So yeah, it's been gradual progress since. I think they probably would back themselves to perform quite well in League One. Actually, I think both of these sides would be a very good addition to League One next season, which makes me even more excited heading into the match. But I think in terms of a story, you probably have to say Port Vale. It's probably got a better recent history than Mansfield in terms of playing above League Two level. And yeah, the added sort of context behind Darryl Clark and what he's gone through, and I'm sure it'll be a lovely moment. There's going to be a round of applause. I think it's in the 8th minute, just to show some support to him as well. So if they can get over the line, would be a very special moment for them as a club. They've also had enormous injury crisis this season, which led to them falling away from the playoff picture. I think Ben Garrity was playing as a striker at one point because that was the only choice that they had. So they have had to cope with a lot this season, Port Vale. So I think for them to get over the line would maybe have a bit more of a fairy tale wrinkle than it would for Mansfield. But I'm sure both clubs will be very strong heading into next season, regardless of the result on Saturday. But yeah, maybe it would pull on the heartstrings a little bit more if Port Vale did get over the line.
Okay, we'll see what happens. Let's get to our score predictions. So, Marcus, like you say, it's going to be a pretty closely fought affair. I think it's safe to assume Wembley this Saturday. Mansfield against Port Vale. Which way do you see it going?
It's very difficult to split them, to be honest. I do think this is a very evenly matched encounter. I'm actually going with this very similar prediction that I did for the League One playoff final, rather unsuccessfully, but I'm going with 1-1 in 90 minutes. I do give Mansfield the edge, but I just think with the quality from wide areas from Worrell, with Proctor to bring on, with the form Wilson's been in, I think Vale have probably got enough to get on the score sheet, particularly if Mansfield end up sitting back and inviting pressure, maybe taking the lead. But I just think with the squad depth that they've got, players to bring off the bench, I think the Stags just have the edge. So I'm going 2-1 to Mansfield in extra time.
Okay, I'm going to go for Port Vale, but I'm going to say it's going to go all the way to penalties. I think we're going to have a 2-2, which, owing to the attacking talent that should be on display this weekend. And then I fancy Vale to get the job done on penalties, largely because they've just had a shootout and they'll have that little bit of maybe mental edge going into it. But it's certainly going to be a close game, isn't it, Mark? It's a bit of a coin flip, really, between these two. Both sides, I think, would deserve a spot in League One next year, but obviously only one can get it. We'll see what happens this weekend. Mansfield and Port Vale play each other this Saturday at Wembley. That's it for Under the Microscope on Football League World TV for this edition. At least coming up, there's one more show on the channel at 4 p.m. That's the EFL Transfer Zone. Sam Rourke hosting that one alongside Ben Wignall and Chris Gallagher. And then one more programme before the week ends, and that's tomorrow at 11 o'clock. Huddersfield Town v Nottingham Forest goes under the microscope for the Championship playoff final, which is on Sunday. Of course, Alfie Burns will be hosting that one alongside Billy Mully. From myself and Marcus, though, it is time to go. Do subscribe to Football League or TV on YouTube if you can, and do like this video as well. That would be greatly appreciated by all of us here. Marcus, great to get your thoughts as ever. Enjoy the game on Saturday, and from myself and Marcus, we'll speak to you very soon.